Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos Podcast, the show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. I'm your host, Chris Bartigone. Back with me on the show, co-host Jamie Franks. Jamie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Good to be. Is that hat new? I like that. Or have you had that?
I have had that. I just
Yeah.
normally do not wear hats when we do this because we've got lighting over here, we've got lighting over here, and we need shadows. And it's a big production deal over here, Jamie. We got
Well,
professional studio lighting.
that is true, and that is also one of the reasons why I don't wear a hat is because I don't want to have to refigure out my lighting to compensate for it. And also, I don't want people to think I'm a loser that's bald-headed with no testosterone or whatever.
But I decided to, my hair was looking a little raggedy from doing a bunch of stuff that I was doing earlier today. And I got to tell you, like when these hats get embroidered, and embroidery is such a finicky thing, right? Like, there's been a couple of designs, and when we do the shirts and we do the hats, when it comes to like polo shirts or hats and we do embroidery, I always get a sample done first so I can see it. And I can't say that I always love the way that it comes out just because, like the biohazard over here won't look right. If the logo is not big enough, you lose some of it. So it's a challenge, but I did decide to wear a hat today and had to adjust lighting accordingly. So I hope I look okay for you there.
And I'm seeing your shirt there, and that reminds me, I just got my ZERT 7-year shirt, and I have to I really like the other ZERT shirts are like, man, I could take them or leave them, but the 7-year one's actually really badass, and I like wearing it.
Yeah, it is. It's my favorite year because it was a different design. And we did a different design for the 12th year, and it was not met with open arms by. I take that back. I've only heard from a couple of members that they didn't like the design for the 12th year. For the 12th year, we did a play or a take on the Dirty Dozen. So the movie poster so it's the movie poster, and it comes with a challenge coin that it's the image, it's the silhouette from the movie poster, and it's the train them, let them loose, and the saying from the movie poster around it. But we did not get good, and it's called obviously the Dirty Dozen because we're 12 years, and it just did not get met with a lot of, well, like I said, I've heard a couple of people say that they didn't like it. I haven't heard anybody say that they loved it. But 7th is one of my favorites.
Yeah. I'm wearing because I'm a prepared individual and I'm prepared to talk about it. I'm wearing my Sneak Reaper Industries shirt, which it's a t-shirt, but it has like it in the inside of it along the bottom. It's got these little smuggler pouches like built into the inside part of the t-shirt.
That's cool. Yeah. It's funny you mention that because I'm about to do an overhaul on the website for some of the shirts. All of the state troop shirts that we have up there right now has the state logo on the front in here, and then it has it on the back in larger. And I redid this logo where it has no actual year and it's just a shield with the skull. And so that's going to be on the front of all of the state troop shirts, and on the back will be the actual state troop design. So
the California one should be the famous like Sasquatch walking, but like his head is the ZERT head. That'd be cool.
That would be pretty cool. The California one is the Republic of California. I think it's got the bear
and Sasquatch Republic.
Cannon. Yeah. So we're going to do an overhaul on that, and you'll get some of the administration stuff out of the way before we get into today's show. And when we get into today's show, I want to go back to the opening of this show and something I say every single week, and it plays into a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. But obviously, thank you guys for joining us today on this show. We're actually recording this show the day before we're putting this up, and we're putting this up tomorrow because of the timing of when the incident happened and where we are in the month. So thank you guys for listening. As you guys are all aware, we put out this show every Thursday on Spotify and Apple through the Firearms Radio Network, and the video portion of this goes out on YouTube on the ZERT Coffee and Chaos YouTube channel. So if you haven't already gone over and liked and subscribed to that one, please do head over there and make sure that you hit the bell so you get notified when we drop the new episodes, and give them a listen, because it helps. Today's show is going to be sponsored by MedTac International. They are going to be a sponsor of our show moving forward. They are part of the ZERT affiliate program. So if you are looking for medical gear, then you can log into the ZERT website and you go over to our affiliates page, and you will find MedTac International's web address, link right to their website, and the coupon code that will get you a discount over on their site. They have everything from IFAKs to full-blown medical kit, up to armor. They've got ballistic helmets, they've got body armor, they've got plate carriers, they've got a wide variety of things. Marco is the owner of that company, and he's a former ZERT member, and now they've got an affiliate program with us now at ZERT. So MedTac International, and they are the sponsor for today's show. So all right. So, Jamie, if you're looking for medical gear, now you know.
Well, you and I have talked about how my favorite supplier of like IFAK items has gone out of business, or has paused their business, or something. And so, as I'm so fond of pointing out, one of the downsides, I mean, it's definitely a necessary evil, but one of the things that sucks about kind of upping your medical preparedness and casualty care game is that, like, pretty much, well, not everything, but a lot of things in your medical kit have an expiration date, and even if you don't use them and never touch them, you do have to have a replacement plan.
I just did a video
to replace things you never used.
Yeah, I think you and I talked about this. I don't know if it was during a show or not, but I just did a video on their brick pouch, it's an IFAK, and I really like it. I think we talked about this, right? It's the material is made from the same material that the Sam Splint is made from. Like the outer shell, which keeps it very rigid. So when you give a pull and you pull out that innards, if you will, where it's got all your stuff, and it kind of unfolds. And then if you need to put that back, you can easily do it with one hand. It doesn't kind of collapse on itself like the rest of the other stuff does. So I really like that brick pouch. I think I showed it on the last one, and well, would you look at that? Here it is, the brick. Look at that, the brick pouch. So here it is from TACMed, and it's a little South Florida company, but yeah, bad boy. There it is, brick. Now they redesigned this piece down here to hold a tourniquet, I believe, so you can attach a tourniquet to that, but there it is, the brick. So I promise you that was not planned, but there it is. But anyway, I guess we're going to have to, medical training, medical gear is going to come into play today. But the reason I wanted to go back to what I said in the beginning, and it's the same thing that I say every week, is I talk about this show being a vessel to talk about anything preparedness or survivalism. And the topic of today's show is based on the 30-year anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing that obviously happened on April 19th, 30 years ago. April 19th, we just kind of rolled right through that over the weekend, and I saw it on Netflix. There is about a 2-hour movie on Netflix about the Oklahoma City bombing, and I reached out to you. And one of the things, and when we do these shows, I kind of do a little bit of due diligence and a little bit of research just so I could have some facts as we kind of talk about it. But one of the things that the perpetrators of this incident, they were in the Army. They met at Fort Benning, and they were radicalized white supremacists, but they both had strong interests in survivalism. And we talk about survivalism and being a survivalist versus a prepper uh, on this show. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands where that the survivalist mindset that we talk about here is, you know, is in no way connected with that type of mentality. You know, there's been the words militia thrown out about the ZERT community over the years, and we've gone at lengths to remind people that this is not a militia group. But you know, watching that special last night and understanding a little bit about Timothy McVeigh and why he ended up where he did and did what he did, we're going to talk about that because it kind of piggybacks on a couple of other incidents that happened in the 90s.
Yeah, and history does repeat itself.
Yeah.
So, April 19th, the bigger significance of April 19th is the anniversary of Lexington and Concord, which were the start of the American Revolution. And anybody that's interested that follows my social media, every April 19th, I do a big post about that, because I think a lot, like, I don't even know if they teach that stuff in school anymore. And the events of April 19th, 1775 are very, very interesting and very important to remember. And that was why McVeigh chose April 19th to do the bombing in Oklahoma City. But so the white supremacist thing, was that ever sussed out? I mean, because nowadays, on the news media, anybody that disagrees with a Democrat is a white supremacist. But I know they were, or McVeigh specifically was inspired by these. I don't know if it's one book or if it's a series of books called the Turner Diaries,
Right.
and that the author of that was the leader or something of a white nationalist movement, and so
Right.
I know, even though that book was McVeigh's inspiration, I don't think I ever have seen or read anything that confirmed McVeigh as a quote unquote white supremacist. Keeping in
Yeah.
mind that now today everybody's a white supremacist.
Right. Exactly.
That
They were
ZERT hat you're
radical.
wearing, if you change that
Yeah,
out for a Trump
exactly.
hat, you're a white supremacist. So.
Right. They were radicalized by a white supremacist. So maybe it just let me rephrase that and saying they were radicalized by, and again, that's just reports that I have read. Is it confirmed? No. Did he ever make that statement? I don't think so. I
Well,
have no idea, but
and like I know, and so like the 90s were especially the early 90s were a very, very charged era. I mean, within the 90s, and this does come into play. In 92 we had Ruby Ridge. In 93 we had the siege at Waco. In 94 was the infamous assault weapons ban was passed. In 95 was Oklahoma City. 90 was it 92? We had the Rodney King
right.
riots in
Yep.
LA, and I mean, so
Reginald Denny, Rodney
yeah,
King,
yeah.
like
So
very race. That was
and
92.
so
Yep.
that was when I was in the 90s. I was in my early teens. In the early 90s I was in my early teens, and again, I'm from North Carolina originally, and I do remember like the North Carolina militia. It was like all these like redneck dudes with big beer bellies that drove around in Chevrolet trucks that they had spray painted camouflage. And I do remember back then, because it had a lot to do with that, it played into the assault weapons ban getting passed. Was the media was very much like playing up this militia movement that was going on across the United
Right.
States, and like all these people getting together on Saturday and running through the woods wearing camouflage clothes and shooting their
Right.
SKSs and calling it calling themselves a militia. And then that kind of, because I do think it seemed kind of white supremacy adjacent, because if you see video clips of like all these like militia training videos back then, they were all they all appear to be white heterosexual Christian
Right.
conservative males. And so, I think that bumps up against I think it's like a guilty by association kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because I don't think, to the best of my knowledge, like the North Carolina militia people, when I was a young boy, a young teenager, they were redneck idiots, but I don't really think they were racists or white supremacists that I know of.
Right.
But if you went to a Klan rally and pulled everybody's white hoods off, they probably the militia people probably looked similar to the white supremacy
Sure.
people, and so
Sure.
I think that gets thrown around a lot. Is the only reason why I brought that up. Because I've never read anything or seen anything that really associated McVeigh to like the Ku Klux Klan or white supremacy or anything like that. I just think a lot of times those things get conflated a little bit.
Yeah,
But
and radicalized by a white
yeah,
supremacist versus being a white supremacist, I guess, are two different things. So let me just go ahead and make that clear. Like that, what I've read is that he was radicalized
mm,
by, maybe did not believe all of that stuff, but the person that, and maybe it was because of that book. They did reference that book
yeah,
in the special that I just watched. And I think you mentioned that there was another special which was a mini series,
yeah,
and they referenced it then as well. I think that obviously he visited Waco during the siege,
yep,
and I believe that uh, one of his statements that was made was that Waco started this, and he was hoping to finish it. And that he was referring to was basically the war with the war with the government. Like obviously
yeah.
the
And I mean, as far as that goes, I can't I can't really begrudge the guy all that much for that thought process or that sentiment, because the 90s were a very politically charged time where of example after example after example of very very gross government overreach and federal law
yeah
enforcement overreach, especially like when you really dig into the details behind Ruby Ridge and Waco. And like I said at the beginning, like it's important to remember like history repeats itself, because I kind of feel like some of these things, it's been 30 years ago, and so now a lot of these same kind of government overreach things are kind of popping their head up again, and and again, kind of either the important takeaway or an important takeaway from both those things is like, I am old enough to remember when Ruby Ridge happened, and I am old enough to remember very clearly when Waco happened. Um, and in both
yeah
of those instances, the news media painted it as the government was the good guys, and they're going in to fight these radical religious cult survivalist off the grid
right
Nazi, like
yeah
I remember, and like now as a grown up looking back on all of those instances, Oklahoma City, not I'm not lumping Oklahoma City into those other incidents, but when you really dig into Ruby Ridge and Waco, like I find myself siding uh more with the people in Waco and Randy
yeah
Weaver.
no I agree. Obviously there there was a lot of speculation. I I'm actually a little bit older than you, and I was not tracking on that, right? I mean, 95, I was 3 years out of high school. I I don't even know what I was doing. I think I was working at a hotel around that time, local hotel conference center. And we didn't have the internet, that's for damn sure. I mean, it was just kind of starting to be a thing, right? But we didn't really have what we have today as the internet.
Well,
I mean,
I never touched the internet until I was either a junior or a senior in high school.
right.
But for Waco specifically, um, one of my for Waco specifically, one of my favorite um, teachers that I ever had in school. Um, I was in the seventh grade when the siege at Waco was happening, and my teacher, Mr. Barnes, he was a Vietnam Green Beret, And his classroom, like he had a little section of his classroom that was like all decorated with his pictures and stuff from when he was a Green Beret in Vietnam. And when the siege at Waco was going on, every single day when we were in class, he would have the TV turned on and muted, but like it was on in the classroom because he was interested in monitoring that situation.
Wait a minute.
But
Let me hold on. Let me back you up here a second. What grade were you when in 95?
93, I was in 7th grade.
93. Okay, 93 you were in 7th grade.
Yeah.
So 93 I was okay, so I had just graduated at from Waco, or when Waco happened. But yeah, I can't tell you. April 93. Yeah, I was living in South Carolina at the time. I was living in Myrtle Beach right around that time. And so I wasn't really tracking that much on Waco, really wasn't paying attention to the world at that time. I remember the Oklahoma City thing, obviously, because it made the news and, it was being talked about. But
yeah,
95, but the internet was a thing at that point. I remember because America Online was like, it was just budding, right? It became a thing where you were able to get a little bit of news that way, but you weren't really looking for it back then. You were amazed by what you could do, but you weren't really, that wasn't the thing.
Well, I was on spring break when the Oklahoma City bombing happened, because I was out of school and it was April, so it couldn't have been summer break. It had to have been spring break. I was out of school and I woke up in the morning and my buddy Jason came over to my house and we just like staggered into my living room and turned the TV on and there was the Oklahoma City building,
So let's kind of go back
Yeah.
to the situation here, right? So obviously 30 years ago, just a few days ago, was the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. It was the federal building in downtown Oklahoma City. Inside that building, there was a branch office for the ATF, I believe,
There was a
FBI.
field office for the
Yeah.
ATF, the Secret Service. I don't think the FBI, but I could be wrong about
Mm.
that. And then there was an IRS office. There was a bank or a credit union, like a federal credit union. But yeah, so
and a daycare.
yeah, like for a daycare for state and federal government employees. Yeah. And the federal building was the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, which I had to look that up, I had to look that name up because I was like, who's that guy? But he was a federal district judge for the 10th Circuit back in the like 60s and 70s. But
oh wow, okay,
yeah, but McVeigh, because of Ruby Ridge and Waco and the federal assault weapons ban and this kind of anti-militia movement, with the government targeting all these state and local militia groups, but especially because of Ruby Ridge and Waco, McVeigh said he targeted the Murrah building in Oklahoma City because of all the ATF and I'd have to look it back up, but possibly the FBI, but definitely the ATF and the Secret Service both had offices in that building. And so he said that he viewed himself as a soldier on the front lines of this movement, and the government was the enemy, and he viewed that building as one of their command centers. And so as a soldier, he should attack the command center of the enemy. So
right. Now, there were two other names involved, and two other people that were arrested for this act. And you have Terry Nichols and Michael Fortier or whatever.
Fortier, yeah.
They were all in the Army. So they were all in the Army. They met during the Army. And in this episode, or this movie that it's still on Netflix. So if you want to catch up and watch what we're talking about, you can find that over on Netflix. But one of the things that I found interesting is when they talked to McVeigh afterwards, he brought up the being bullied in school and was an outcast, never had any friends. And it's just like, dude, like he's older than me, right? I guess if I had to go back and try and figure out when he was born, but if he was in the army, and he was of age during 93, I would say he was a little bit older than I was, or than I am.
Yeah, because he served in Desert Storm.
Desert Storm, right? And
So
so I was still in high school at the time.
yeah.
So he was at least 5 years. I would say he was at least 5 years older than I was. Um, we talked a little bit about bullying before, and what that looks like in today's day and age. And I know that there's kids out there right now, my nieces, Amy's girls, like where there are mental health days from school, and that blows my mind, to be honest with you. We didn't get
Yeah.
mental health days back then. Like you went to school and you just dealt with it. I made fun of kids when I was in high school. Kids made fun of me.
Yep.
It
100%.
just seemed like a rite of passage. Like it created a tough skin. Like it made you a little bit tougher, in my opinion. But
Yeah, and in the newer Netflix documentary, because like you said, there is another one that came out a few years ago that was multi-part, that was far more in depth. But the new one, they had a recording of McVeigh talking about all that, and this part made me laugh. He said because he was so skinny,
oh yeah,
all the kids said he looked like a chicken, and so they called him like
Chicken
McNugget McVeigh.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and that
McNoodle
made me laugh.
McVeigh or
Yeah,
something like that. Like
but
it was ridiculous.
and yeah, he said that was a driving factor for why he wanted to join the army, was because he wanted to be a big tough guy, and so
Right.
the joining the military will make me a big tough guy. So yeah.
Yeah. And I guess from there he met a couple of like-minded individuals, and
So it's that too, like, because having been in the military, like I know, when you're from a small town like I am, and for the most part, the people you graduate high school with are the same people that you went to kindergarten with. So like,
true.
whatever nickname or whatever thing you get made fun of for, like, sticks with you, because you don't ever get a chance to like shake the etch a sketch, so to speak, because all of these people for your whole life. And so I've seen personally, these young kids that are from the middle of nowhere in the United States. They join the Navy in my case, and these young kids, that this is the first time they've been able to shake the etch a sketch and
Yeah.
start over from scratch. And so you can kind of craft your whatever you want your own identity to be. And so
Yeah.
I wonder, did he find these guys that were quote unquote like-minded, or was he just a young, dumb, naive kid from bumfuck nowhere, and just kind of fell in with these guys, and he was just young and impressionable, and he was like,
Well,
that guy's my
one of the
sergeant, I want to be like that guy. That's
yeah, one of the things that they did say in the special that's on Netflix right now is that he kind of fell into the same situation where
yeah.
he did not make a lot of friends while in the army. And one of the things when it comes to the military that you hear from a lot of people is they love the camaraderie. Now, I don't know if that is universal across the board. I don't know if just because you enter basic training with a group of individuals that you become this strong bond of brotherhood and sisterhood forever. I mean, you're in the military now. I've listened to Paul talk about it, and everyone refers to them as their brothers and sisters in the military. I don't know how strong is that bond. Like you said, he served in Desert Storm, so maybe there is a stronger bond if you do deploy together and you are in that kind of situation together, where if you are if you do not deploy, maybe it doesn't get formed as much. With I don't know, obviously I can't speak to it.
Yeah,
But
so I mean, that is definitely the case. I would say, like, obviously, like, the people you go to boot camp with, for the most part, after boot camp, you lose touch with all those people because you all go in different directions. But yeah, the people that you do end up having the strongest bonds with are the people that you deployed with. But with the camaraderie piece and the deployment piece, and he served in Desert Storm. He got a Bronze Star for Valor for something
yeah,
he did in Desert Storm, which, I mean, that's not a small thing.
right.
but then I find it interesting, like if he did really love the camaraderie and the patriotism and proud of his service and somewhat of a heroic soldier, if you got a Bronze Star with a V, um, combat veteran guy, obviously, if he got a Bronze Star with a V, but. So I find it interesting that like right after Desert Storm, he like immediately got out of the military. So it's like if you loved it so much and you were so into it so much and you were loving the camaraderie with your bros, why did you immediately get out after Desert
Right.
Storm?
But I think that's when he started to talk about some of these, or with these guys. I believe this disdain for the government started in the military because he
Yeah.
did talk about in the military where he lost all of his freedom and
Oh yeah,
your
that's
freedom,
right. He did say
right.
that.
So
Yeah,
I think some of the disdain
that's right.
started there. Now when you break this down to its most simplistic form, here's a guy who hated the government. He hated the basically the body that governed his journey. Like you hated the government that was your boss, basically,
Well,
right?
I have heard many people over the years. It's kind of a joke, but not really. Like say that the guys that are getting out of the military or guys that are retiring, you ask them, what's the thing you're looking forward to most, and like kind of one of the like jokey answers that everybody says is I'm looking forward to having all parts of the Constitution apply to me again, because McVeigh is not completely wrong about that. When you're in the military, all the parts of the Constitution don't really apply to you for the time that you're in the military, and when you get out, you're just a normal regular citizen again, and the military does strip away a lot of your freedoms. But
Right. So
it's part of the deal.
right. And but that's a deal that people sign up for
Correct.
voluntarily, right? So
100%. That's correct.
and
And so,
and
but that you're exactly right in making the point that he decided for himself that he didn't like that and said
right.
peace.
Yeah. So maybe that's why obviously
Yeah,
he got out and
I
that's
forgot
what
about that
it
little part.
led him down that path. Um Again, they don't really go into the planning portion of the incident in this special. They may in that mini series that you're talking about, but what they do cover in this is basically the quickness that he was A, apprehended, and B,
Yeah.
determined to be the person involved, one of the three people involved. It didn't take but a couple of days. Now Fortune would have, I guess Fortune stepped in and he was stopped for not having a license plate on his vehicle, which detained him because of he also had a firearm. Um and I believe it was an unregistered firearm.
I don't. It was a concealed firearm. I don't know if it was registered or unregistered because back in those days that was a little murky. But he was definitely like illegally carrying a concealed firearm. Yeah.
Right. So that was his reasoning for being detained. But the police officer was like, yeah, that situation is literally a arraignment and you're released to
Yeah.
appear back. But for whatever reason, it didn't happen. So you got to look at some of those things like, holy cow, like, who knows what would have happened if this dude didn't get pulled over?
Yeah. So, my 3 tours in Afghanistan, I was part of counter ID task force, and so this truck bomb, which we would have called a VBID, a vehicle borne IED. I mean, this is an IED. Nobody was
Right.
using that term back then, but this
Yep.
truck bomb was an IED. Um, it was like if you look it up, it's an ANFO bomb, which is ammonium nitrate and fuel oil, so ANFO.
Yep.
Ammonium nitrate is a very common agricultural fertilizer. So this bomb, it was a 7,000-pound bomb.
Yeah.
It was in several. The explosive was in several 55-gallon drums, but the bomb consisted of 5,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate, about 200 pounds of liquid nitromethane, that's like racing fuel.
Yeah.
And then 350 pounds of Tovex, which is an agricultural explosive it's kind of the modern replacement for dynamite, and it looks, when you buy it, or when you see it, it looks like sausages, like like in a Bugs Bunny
Yeah.
cartoon whenever they
Yep.
had
Yep.
like sausages. That's what it
Yeah.
looks like. Because it's a lot more stable than dynamite and lasts longer. Like dynamite can deteriorate, and the Tovex really can't. But back then, all of these things were purchasable without any ID or without any license or without any background check. You could buy these things at farm stores, which is what they did. And they mixed them all together and made this big 7,000-pound truck bomb that, when it went off, was so powerful it basically erased like 2/3 of the building, of the Murrah building. Everybody, I'm sure, has seen the pictures. It looks like somebody took a gigantic ice cream scoop and just scooped out 2/3
Yeah.
of the building.
Yeah.
But the blast was so powerful, it damaged 324 other buildings in the downtown Oklahoma
Yeah.
area, and it killed 168 people and wounded 684 more. So
Yeah. And obviously, out of that 168 people that died, there were children of, under there were young children in there, and that was
yeah,
obviously one of the hardest things to see at the end of that episode. Well, there was a couple of things that really, or the movie, there was a couple of things that kind of set me back in quietness for a minute, like, but to another point to that explosion was so immense that a piece of the transfer case from the Ryder truck ended up, eventually it's actually what led the authorities to McVeigh, but it ended up, I don't know, like 2 streets over,
yeah.
falling into a car, and they were able to pull data from that transfer case, match it back to a VIN, match it back to the Ryder truck, and then they could go back and figure out where it was rented.
Where it was
Now,
rented, and then I think that led them to because the truck was rented under an alias, but then they found out that the same alias had been used to reserve a hotel room in the same area, and the alias they used was made up, but the address that they used was the actual address of Terry Nichols's brother in Michigan or something like that.
yes, but no, it was used to order food.
Oh, that's
The
right.
alias was used to order food. The dude McVeigh actually rented the room under his name. He
Yeah.
actually rented Timothy. So he used Timothy McVeigh to rent the hotel, but then used the alias that was used to rent the truck to get the food. They matched it up, and boom, they had it. Now,
So
here's the interesting part. Hold on
yeah.
before you jump in. Here's the interesting part. McVeigh was in custody at this point by the time they had his name. They couldn't just head over to click, click, click computer land to determine with their system if this person was in custody already. They had these big giant machines, and that was what I found very interesting about that show, is when they showed these machines, they had to insert these big giant canister things that were tapes to then search those tapes to determine if this person was in custody, which I
Well,
believe
no,
that's
so
why it took.
they were searching to see, because they had this name.
Right.
They were searching to see if there was a criminal record associated with that name, and then it was like, oh, this guy's in custody in a courthouse 40 miles
Right.
from here right now. But
Now, hold on
yeah,
before you make your point, which because I just want to wrap this up there,
mhm.
which I find very interesting, because if they put his name in, why would it have not come up with military records? Like, why wouldn't those two be connected somewhere?
I, um, Well, I mean, it's 2025, and we're now just learning that everybody that has like ever had a federal retirement or a military retirement, it's in some cave in Pennsylvania, like on paper in a filing
Yeah.
cabinet, and we still
Mhm.
haven't fixed that. So,
Right. Okay.
so part of me thinks that maybe it was, but that just wasn't an important enough detail to be included in this documentary. But the
Yeah.
other part of me is like, well, it's now 30 years later, and we're still finding out that our federal retirements are processed in the bottom of a mine, in a cave in Pennsylvania, or whatever.
Right.
But also the thing I thought was interesting was they thought they were being smart by doing all of their communications via this like prepaid calling card, but then
Yeah.
that ended up being, so I was impressed that like in this early age of the internet, they weren't able to just like go on and search like you said, but there must have been some sort of computer system attached to this prepaid calling card because they said the prosecutors were able to pull the records associated with
Yep.
that calling card, and that's how they assembled the entire like
Yeah.
web for the prosecution, because you know, he was in Topeka, Kansas, and called this number, which was registered to this address, and it was that guy. And then it showed that like 3 days later, he was at this other place, which is where he was buying the fertilizer, and then that guy
Yeah.
called this guy. So that was it. So it's this weird dichotomy, and it's the same thing. You know, I always say like when people bring up O.J. Simpson, like the O.J. Simpson murders like took place at like the exact right point in time, because like if somebody did that now, you'd be arrested in 10 minutes because everybody has Ring doorbell cameras and traffic
Yeah.
cameras and all. But like in the early 90s, like that really wasn't much of a thing. And
Right.
so it's weird that they were able to search some things but not able to search other things, and so it's a weird point in history.
You know what's interesting about what you just said there? You wonder if somewhere deep down, the evolution of to the Ring camera, the Ring doorbell camera that we have today is based on a couple of those different things, right? Like people like maybe break-ins and burglaries. Obviously it's burglary and break-ins, but could somebody have sat there and been like, gosh, if we only had a Ring camera, we could have definitely figured out if OJ did it.
Well, and the other interesting thing about that is I think if you went back to 1995 and told people that 30 years from now, everybody's going to have a 4K high definition video camera in their pocket, and there's going to be a high definition camera on everybody's doorbell and on everybody's driveway and in everybody's house and in every store and on street corners, and people would think, oh, well, crime must not exist anymore. But the thing that I find interesting is now we have cameras everywhere more than ever before, and like nobody seems to care. And criminals that know they're being recorded, it does not deter them in the least, it seems.
Yeah. But you were about to make a couple of points there based off of the
so you know, the fact that McVeigh just did this thing, which is even still to this day is the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in American history, you know, still to this day. And 70 minutes later, he was arrested for a license plate and a fire, you know, carrying illegally carrying a firearm, and was like put in the county lockup. You know, a lot of people, that fuels their conspiracy theories, like, because so, you know, people think kind of from an outsider perspective that like, well, somebody that was this detailed and they planned this thing, and really like the planning of the bombing was good because only those 3 or 4 people knew about it, and they did successfully keep it a secret, and they did successfully pull it off. I mean, you know, the fact that they all got busted afterwards doesn't change the fact that the bombing was a success.
True.
Their mission was accomplished. They just didn't get away, but that fuels a lot of conspiracy people because it's like, oh, come on, if they put that much time in planning and executing this thing, how could he let himself get, you know, arrested for such a dumb thing 70 minutes and 40 miles, you know, later? But so that begs the question, like, I always think about it like in the movie Seven, when Brad Pitt's character is talking to Kevin Spacey's character in the backseat of the police car, and like, well, do crazy people know that they're crazy? Because like it kind of makes me think that they were so focused on the task and the bomb and the execution of, you know, of their mission and everything, that like the getaway was like an afterthought or not really much of a thought. I know.
Yeah. I want to interject a couple of things, right? So, because I think where you were going with that is you were like the conspiracy theory part of it, right? Like when in that movie last night, they said initially there were 2 images, 2 drawings from 2 potential suspects. Now, one dude looked like he had dark hair, one had the flat top, which was obviously McVeigh. And he got into some yellow beater car, right? I don't remember what the kind of car it was, but how did the car get there? Where, you know, like where did McVeigh drive from, right? And how did the car get there for him to then take? They never went into if it was stolen, if it was staged, if it was planted, but somebody put that car there. And we don't know who. And then the other thing is, but go ahead, finish your point before I chime in on the
No,
next
so I mean,
piece.
just like with all the people that want to cling on to a conspiracy theory, it's just like my thought to that that's where my mind goes is they were so focused on building the bomb, transporting the bomb, placing the bomb, and detonating the bomb that they weren't like the getting away part wasn't even really thought of that much. But then it makes like this is the thing where do crazy people know that they're crazy, and are we trying to apply logic and rationale to an irrational person? So
Yeah, so I guess I would have to challenge you with that. Like, would you think that he's crazy? I mean, everything, because to me, crazy didn't really come into it. I don't think he would be crazy. Charles Manson, crazy, lunatic, right? I mean, McVeigh was calculated, and methodical and evil, but does crazy and evil, are they one and the same? I don't know, because if he was crazy, then I don't think he would have. Wouldn't there have been somebody who have said, "Oh no, this guy's crazy and he shouldn't stand trial," or was his act so heinous the authorities were just like, "Fuck it, kill this guy." I don't know.
well, I'm a believer that two things can be true at once, and I think you just hit both of those two things, those two nails right on the head. Because you're right. He was very calculated. He was very coherent. He was very deliberate. He definitely knew what he was doing and the implications of that. And like you can listen to recordings of McVeigh, because it even references in the documentary that we're talking about. Some reporter that went into the jail where McVeigh was, like, interviewed him for like hundreds of hours, and has all the
Oh yeah,
recordings, and McVeigh never once tried to say he didn't do it, or it wasn't me, or I was set up. Like, he knew exactly what he was doing. He was very clear about it, and all, like, never expressed remorse for one single moment. And like, even when they asked him about all the kids and babies that died in the daycare, he said that, in his mind, they were just collateral damage. And so
right,
to me, that speaks to the evil part that you're talking about. But to me, that's where it blurs the line up against crazy. And because he viewed himself as a soldier in an army that didn't exist, engaged in the front lines of this battle against the government in this war that doesn't really exist. And it's kind of
right,
like, to me, it's the same as like when a kid shoots up a school and somebody tries to blame it on video games, but you know 30 million other people played that exact same video game and didn't go shoot
yeah,
up a school. So the
yeah,
kid that did, does that make him crazy? Yeah, it does. And so I think you know being rational and coherent, and at least enough to understand what you did wrong and stand trial for it, is one thing. But the other thing is, he definitely had some thoughts and ideas that I would say were crazy. He was not some soldier in some imaginary army, and there hasn't been a war against the government for 250 years. So um
true.
so it,
I would, I guess, put money down to as a good bet, right? It's a good bet. Like, if this person sat down with a psychiatrist, would they label him as insane or sane?
well, so yeah,
Now,
so,
you
and
know,
I'm not a psychologist, so I don't
right.
know, but I would definitely say he was delusional, and a normal person doesn't build a 7,000-pound bomb and go blow up a building because the government harmed people that McVeigh didn't even know. I mean, like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can
Listen,
sympathize with
yeah,
the people in Waco, and you can sympathize with Randy Weaver on Ruby Ridge, which I do. Um, but McVeigh didn't know. It's not like McVeigh was like
no,
homeboys with those people,
right,
but
yeah,
he built a 7,000-pound bomb and killed 170 people. Uh,
right.
so I mean, there definitely is some delusion. So I don't know where that falls into the sane
Yeah,
or insane spectrum, but
I do. I mean, I don't know, right? And then the other thing that I'm curious about is, um, well, gosh, a couple things. Obviously, McVeigh was put to death, right? So he's gone. He's dead. It's over with. That's
Or
that.
was he?
Or was he? Who knows? But he was in a holding cell for, I don't know if it was 48 or 72 hours. I don't know where he was in there, right? But
I
at
think they
least
said,
48.
yeah, I think they said he had been in custody. It was like 2 days or like 2 business days or something. Because I think they said
Right.
he had been in custody for like 30 something hours, which spanned 2 days.
Right.
Because I remember the district attorney or whatever it was they interviewed, and they said like this just happened to be like the time period between when he was arrested and when he was arraigned. He fell like on some
Right.
borderline,
Yeah.
because normally a person would have already been arraigned and been bonded out by that
Right.
amount of time.
Now, what I find really interesting, and man, oh man, I hope this um interviewer who has all of that information asked the question, and I don't know why I'm dying to know this, but in those, we'll just call it 48 hours, in those 48 hours of you being in a holding cell, and now you can see the TV, because he does reference, he can see the TV of what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And now, and in that span, they're now literally putting up his picture in a sketch. And I believe the people in that jail said something about the sketch and him. And McVeigh said, no, they're looking for somebody who's 5'8" to 6 foot. I'm 6'2". And so they dismissed it. But
They're
could
like,
you
oh yeah, you're right.
imagine,
Good
like,
point, bro.
right? Like, yeah, good point. Yeah. Okay. We got you. You got us. I mean, I would love to know what was going through his mind. Like, holy shit. Do they realize what's about to, like, do they have any idea? Like, or is this guy just literally tapping his foot, waiting to get arraigned to get out of there? One of the other things that was interesting is the police officer that pulled him over said he saw a bulge from his jacket, right? And uh
He said he was reaching for his wallet with his right hand, and his wallet was in his back pocket. And when he did, it like pulled his shirt tight on the left
yeah,
side, and he saw the gun in the
yeah.
waistband on the left side. Yeah.
Yeah, and he said something about grabbing it, and he reached for his sidearm, and McVeigh said, well, mine's loaded and ready to go, or something like that. And he says, well, mine's loaded too.
So that made me raise my eyebrows a little bit and think that, like, obviously the police officer that arrested McVeigh, obviously that's a provable thing, but that story seems embellished a little bit to me, because the way he said
Maybe.
it
Yeah.
was McVeigh reached for his wallet with his right hand, and it pulled the shirt tight on the left side, and he could see the bulge. And so the officer reached and put his hand on the gun, and
Yep.
then McVeigh put his hand on top of the officer's hand, and he said the officer drew his gun and stuck it to his head.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, officer, that's a loaded gun. And he's like, well, mine's loaded too, son. Like, to
Right.
me,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
sounds a little Hollywood to me, but
I
I don't.
mean, you know, if this guy just killed 168 people without remorse, and without ever batting an eyelash, what's one more? What's a police officer who's just pulling him over? You know what I mean? Like, that's confusing to me. That would raise a couple of questions. Like, okay, like you're getting pulled over. I mean, do you know that you don't have a license plate on the back of your car?
Well,
That
and
you,
you make another good point, because they show the video footage of when they raided the Nichols's house,
yeah.
and it's like, if they bombed this building to, as revenge for Waco and Ruby Ridge, why didn't they shoot it out with the cops? Like,
Well, they weren't
uh,
even home when they raided
oh,
his.
that's right.
They,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right. You're right. Yeah.
but they waited for him to come home. The dude took off. Nichols took off in his car and was driving around, and then I think he stated that he realized he was being followed, so he literally drove to a police department and turned himself in. So
Yeah. So,
again,
but in with the part about them actually building the truck bomb, one of the things they did is supposedly they arranged the barrels inside the truck as like in the shape of a semicircle to like make it like a shape charge,
Yeah.
and direct it at the building. But the barrels that were up closest to the truck cab where McVeigh was driving, um, he said that they loaded those with like extra blasting caps or something like that because he had a Glock pistol. And had he been pulled over or confronted as he was driving the truck up and parking the truck in front of the building, his plan was to draw his pistol and just shoot back through the cab and detonate the bomb. So again, like they had thought that out.
Right. But
But
you
why?
let your
Yeah, exactly. Why not shoot that cop? Why not shoot it
right.
out with the cops that raided the house? Like,
Yeah. Which again does just like some of those things don't make a lot of sense.
yeah,
I don't know that they have to make sense in reality because it's over, it's done with. You had a couple of wackos who pulled this off. But if they were so radicalized and they hated the government, then they wouldn't have gone out like that. They would have gone out like David Koresh and you
you would
know,
think. Yeah,
right,
I agree.
right,
But
like the whole scene with 3,000 Miles to Graceland, where Kevin Costner's Elvis guy gets pulled over by a cop and he's like, let's draw, like, it's like the Wild West and it's high noon. Like, why did McVeigh pull that shit out
yeah,
and start going to town?
that's a very underrated movie, by the way. I
It
love that
is.
movie.
Yeah, exactly. Great movie. I really enjoyed it. Well, again, great movie, entertaining movie. Entertaining movie. Was it great? Who knows?
Dude,
Uh
any movie where they've got belt-fed weapons, I'm in. Like, and at the end of the movie, Costner he's rocking a saw,
saw,
and
yeah.
that made the movie
But he
for me.
also hired Ice-T to be his assassin, and
I told you to hire a
he
couple
just
of guys. He is a
right,
couple of guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
Coming down, I think, was he coming inverted with his two guns and he was shooting in circles? I
Yeah,
don't
he
know.
was he
Yeah,
was rappelling down from the ceiling, inverted with like
yeah,
two Mac 10s, like spinning in a
yeah,
circle. Yeah.
spinning at a time. But um, there's obviously a lot of things to continue to unpack about this situation, right? It started with one situation, the Ruby Ridge thing, and then you've got the Waco, Texas, the Branch Davidians, and there's a lot. I mean, we could do a whole separate show on that, and maybe we
Yeah.
will. I know that there was looking at that now later in life as somebody who, I mean, I don't want as much government, you know, uh, interference as there is when it comes to certain things. Um, but are we going to hold up and do the shit that happens? No, I mean, I don't, it's a weird thing, right? If you look at today, I mean, I don't know, maybe how many firearms, how many people that carried firearms back in 1995 versus how many today. You said, you referenced history often repeats itself. We're 30 years away from that. I mean, how many years we are away from the North Hollywood shootout? Is it only a matter of time, or is technology and information evolved so much now where it's going to be a different kind of attack? Uh, has the
That's an
government been
interesting point. Because I had a conversation a couple years ago with a guy, and I actually think the conversation started around Ruby Ridge and Waco, and one of my friends made the point that like if the government wanted to come after like me, for example, if the government wanted to come after me today, um, they're less likely to stack up at my front door, but they're more likely to freeze my bank accounts. They'll go to my daughter's school and take her out of school. They'll shut my cell phone off. They'll shut my internet off. They'll make it impossible for me to communicate with anybody. I won't have access to any money. They will have my daughter. They'll be, like, so they'll be able to take
right.
me down or take you down, or whatever, without ever having to fire a shot or breach a door. So, and that's, I guess I can't disagree. That does seem like solid logic, but we're also living in a time where there's several instances of like federal agents showing up, to January 6th
Right.
people and shooting their dogs and all that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we're living in a time where it's a little bit of both, but I do think in this time of information sharing, I think a lot more people are smarter and wiser to it. At least I would like to think, again, because going back to, I remember these events happening in real time, and I do remember the news media painting, the federal agents were the good guys, and the people in the Branch Davidian compound were these religious fanatic nut jobs. And then, after the fact, they tried to say that David Koresh was a child molester or whatever. And I don't know about that, but I do know that the federal government murdered a lot of women and children in that compound.
Yeah.
I do know that they went there specifically to make a spectacle, because they said that, David Koresh like went to, there was like some store in town that he went there like every day, and they could have just waited for him to go there and taken him into
Yeah.
custody. And the thing they were taking him in custody for was allegedly he agreed to like saw some shotguns off for some guy
Yeah.
that he met in town. And so
Right.
they did all that over possibly I don't even think they know if he did it, but they went there supposedly because he possibly sawed off a couple of shotgun
Right.
barrels, so
And one I guess as we wrap up today's
yeah.
episode, there was one kind of takeaway from the documentary that I just watched on there. When they're interviewing people back, I think it was after Waco, where they have all these, like you said, camouflage dudes in the woods being interviewed, and they're like,
Yeah.
they're coming for our guns, they're coming for our guns, they're like, we need to be prepared and be ready. And you got these guys out there doing their training. It it's it's a it, it's really scary to see that kind of that mentality.
Yeah.
Because we're all sitting here the same thing, right? Any of us who are staunch supporters of the Second Amendment, that is what the Second Amendment is written for. That is
100%.
that is the embodiment of the Second Amendment. And they're being painted as the villains. And yet when you look at the ATF during that, the FBI during that, they were the villains.
Yeah.
And now you look at those agencies today, and they're still the villains of our story.
Well,
Now,
but
granted,
I do think it has gone in an arc. I do think that those federal agencies were a hive of scum and villainy back then, and then I think they got cleaned up, and now I think we're back in the trough of the wave again.
well, yeah. I mean, you've got some new people with our current administration that are supposed to go in there and clean things up. You can only hope that that is the actual mission for those people that are in charge now, but only time is going to tell.
And for what it's worth, I do think, speaking of things going in waves and arcs, I do think we are entering a time, or certainly it seems like it, where we're actually getting seemingly we're getting a lot of Second Amendment wins, in these federal courts and in the Supreme Court and all that stuff. And it was the opposite of that back in the 90s. But
yeah.
so
All right. Well, listen, as always, thank you guys for being here. I'd love to hear some of your feedback in the comments below on this. One, do you think McVeigh was crazy or just evil? You know, I would love to hear. I would love to hear about that in the comments. So sound off. Remember to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified when we drop more of these videos. But until next time, you guys stay safe. Jamie?
that's all I got, man. It's easy to be hard. It's hard to be smart.
All right. Stay safe. Stay prepared. ZP002 out.